Sometimes, well, the only thing that we've not been able to do is really well is actually put environment in front and then now say safety and health. But of course, they all work hand in hand. Now, we depend on our environment, and environment also depends on us. Human activities influence what is in our environment. And as a result of that practice, we can either practice or influence that environment either safely or unsafely. Now, what is our environment? We are part of the environment. We are, it's not just about the plants or the trees or the air, but human beings ourselves. We are part of the environment. So whatever we do affects the environment either positively or negatively. Now, in bad practices, in doing bad practices, unsafe conditions emanate. Unsafe practices, like we've mentioned, affects our health. So if you look at it from that angle, that is one part of it. And then also, if we do damage the environment, the physical environment, we certainly also are introducing an ill health situation again. So really, we all work hand in hand to make sure that safety becomes a lifestyle. When your practices are unsafe, then you are already putting pressures on the others. So the first thing is we want to make sure that we are healthy conscious. We also want to make sure that safety conscious. We have that responsibility, and we must be responsible environmentalists. The medical waste that we generate from our homes are handled very safely. Now, LOMA has provided medical waste contractors, PSP. We need to, and we must, as a responsible citizens that care for each other and does not just selfishly think about oneself alone, because whatever goes round comes round, must make sure that we patronize those PSPs. It is important. Why do we have to patronize them? They would enlighten us on the actual type of containers that we're allowed to make use of. The safe boxes for needles, syringes, and sharp objects, medical waste bags that are all being given freely. And thanks to the Lagos State government, thanks to the supporters and sponsors of LOMA that are doing this. So it goes beyond just our homes. If we can get that into our psyche and get a practice, we will do that in the hospitals. We will do that at work. They say charity begins at home. If you're not enlightened about something, then you are going to fall short of that. Now, the second thing is when you are trained, you must practice. You must put into practice what you're trained about. Attitude is very important. That is one key thing that must change amongst a lot of these handlers themselves, because they expose themselves to injuries, diseases, chronic and acute. Chronic being something that is, a long-term issue. Acute could be spontaneous. So the government is saying protect yourself, enlighten yourself to make sure that you carry out your duties, but carry them out safely. You do not have to expose yourself. Limit your exposure to those dangerous objects. And that is what the Safety Commission is here to support FEMA, support LOMA, support all stakeholders to make sure that we have the right standard to be embraced.
A director of medical waste management from the United States, Dr. Latoya Whitley, explains how it works in her country and her passion for Africa.
In comparison with what's happening in medical waste management in Nigeria and what happens in medical waste management in the U.S., they call it OSHA, and it's the federal government that regulates health waste management, and every facility is certified, and they come and check and make sure that you're following. First and foremost, there's education, and more education and education. Once you are aware, each facility then is responsible to make sure that we practice medical waste management. And we call it OSHA. That's in America. And it's managing blood-borne pathogens. So those are the types of infections that you can get from blood-borne pathogens. They come from the blood, they come from body fluids, and and they make us ill if they're not properly handled. So we've been doing that in the United States for many, many years. And when the federal government is involved and the funding is involved, then it's possible. When people know how important it is to prevent illness, it saves so much money. So most hospitals and clinics are responsible for their own medical waste management. And they don't rely on the government to pay for their, well, in the World Health Organization, it's if you create the waste, you're responsible for cleaning it up. And so the difference here is individuals relying on the government to clean up the waste that they created. We'll talk about LAMA, Lagos State Waste Management Authority. And when I began in 2007, it was at that point where the government decided that it was important to have medical waste management and began to support, the state government began to support medical waste management. And once the government supports it and is willing to put finances in that area, then people begin to get involved. We started out with just driving cars to clinics, and there was no involvement with either LAMA or the government. And since that point in 2006, we have spread all over Lagos State, and as you heard in the report, that LAMA is actually identified, because there weren't even identification of all the clinics, let alone what they were actually doing. So they've done identification, and with HEFIMA have gone to and began to educate everybody, and the providing of free bags and boxes for collection was very helpful. So we've come from actually a relatively non-existent in 2005, which to active, progressive, positive, and successful collection process and process flow, which now we're sharing information with, that's LAMA, with all of the other states, so they can begin where we began 5 years ago. To control infection and medical waste, there is never enough education. Even if you educated children in school, they wouldn't play in the landfills, doctor and nurse, and get infected with those types of things. So you can start in elementary school, or we call it elementary school, with the children, and education systems and healthcare facilities. Once everyone understands the cost of the diseases that come from medical waste management, then people will be less likely to pick it up in the landfill and more likely to make sure they segregate at the site when they are actually receiving those blood-borne pathogens, that's blood, body fluids, placenta, from the patients. But the interest in that was the fact that I have a heart for Africa, and in more ways than when I do medical missions as well. And because there's a lot of opportunity for people to take a little information and actually produce a lot of health benefits from it. What I have experienced with doctors and nurses and technical staff with relationship to medical waste management is a high desire to do the right thing. Desire to collect right, to segregate properly, and really motivated to actually do the right thing for the people. And I find that people are highly skilled, highly educated, and so with collaborative education and support from both the government and the facilities, it will happen. It will happen very well.
The bottom line is that we'll be able to maintain a healthier, cleaner environment if we manage the waste properly. Short of that, a lot of infectious processes will come up. Infection like HIV has been documented even in the United States, even in South Africa. Okay, when children even have exposure to such medical waste. Okay, in our environment, the same as well. We've had a series of patients with tetanus, which I demonstrated. Okay, during the lecture session, we've had patients that had cholera, enteric fevers, and quite a host of infectious processes, which are ongoing. And of course, stroke too. I mean, like I also mentioned, there's some infectious process.